All right, so now that we had an opportunity to talk about the assignment, you can see there's a wide variety of items in D2L to share more about the assignment. We've had a chance to do some brainstormings on topics, specifically the topic of food insecurity and food deserts, and we found a winner. And even though I was probably pretty close to the winner myself at 36 different items, let's try one more thing for brainstorming. List topics for an informative speech on food insecurity and food deserts. At this point, the students who had never experienced Chat GPT were really wowed, myself included, seeing how quickly it went. At the end of this, I said, well, let's look and see how many topics they had. Did they win? And that was pretty fun. And we talked about how you could be even more specific so that you could possibly win. List topics on an informative speech on food insecurity and food deserts. I actually, in the classroom, misspelled desserts, and we talked about garbage in, garbage out. This time, however, we put down 37. And in this case, we talked about this particular participant would have won the brainstorming game. I then asked about the ethics of this. We used different cups that are already in the computer lab to indicate a green, a red, a yellow on whether this was ethical. This next second stage we did is I asked them to go ahead and experiment and see what the outline would look like. And so in their process, they asked, write an informative speech on food deserts. And we went ahead and they were once again amazed. I asked them to compare and contrast this and the topics to how they would approach it in the class if it would work. And in many cases, it came up to be a persuasive speech. In many cases, it didn't have the full format or the research that our speech would have. And I even began by saying, good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. And other ones that would come up, ladies and gentlemen. So we looked at this, we compared it to the speech that one of my students in the past had created. And we looked at her outline, and the work and the rigor that I asked them to do includes an audience analysis, goals, and to really personalize the speech. I talked about how it didn't look like the assignment, and I could make them into super cheaters instead of, just using AI. I could show them how to use this differently to create the outlines. But in the end, we talked about how this speech and how Shara, especially in this end part, talks about.
It's important to understand that the cause of food deserts happen really because we're not really aware of what a food desert is and how income and lack of transportation really play a huge role in food deserts today.
Well, she talks here too a little bit about Minnesota. And she gives
in the role in many people's areas that have food deserts, but it's not as severe as
at this point. We'd also talked about how being in a Rochester environment, it was feeling adapted with Minnesota information, but again, it wasn't about Rochester. And she talks a little bit about her survey in this speech as well. So by showing them the result of a generic AI speech and the assignment, I talked about how it was very, very clear to see their cheating heart on this one, as the old Hank Williams tune would share. At some point, I might tell them how they can make it more adapted and thoughtful. And at that point, I'm just thinking through, do I give them the worksheet? Do I tell them about looking at more localized sources, asking the Chat GPT to be more specific? These are all things that we'll have to think about.